Okay, here we are live. We're back for another season or series of our conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion. And I kind of rebranded what we were doing in the spring, just so everybody knows this is what we're calling it now, JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. It's kind of a cool acronym. It worked with EPIC, so that's why I started using it. And we're going to have guests come in to talk with us about Caste. And we're going to get started now. So here's our ticker. Today we're going to be kind of under the theme of further deterioration is on our hands in the first two chapters. But before we jump into that, let's bring on our two people who are joining me today. Yay! Welcome back, everybody. Richard, London.
Hey,
everybody.
Happy Labor Day.
Yeah.
Happy
Labor
Day to people who are actually taking the day off. For those of you that are working, thanks. And I hope you're getting double time.
Yes.
We've taken a big break in having these conversations. I didn't realize that I was really burned out at the end of that last, it was 4 months. I didn't realize how tired I was going to be at the end of it. And so it just made sense to wait until September to start this back up, give people some more time to enjoy whatever summer they had left, and then jump back in after everyone kind of dealt with the mess of getting back to school, which has been messy for a lot of reasons. But I want to give Richard and London a little bit of time to reintroduce and talk about what you've been doing the last few months. Richard?
Well, I've been, I am Richard McCrow. I work at Bakersfield College and have been there for 10 years and also am retired military, but worked in training and education in the military towards the end of my career. And then I was a medical service corps officer and a hospital corpsman, and so I'm here today. And what have I been doing the past few months? Just getting ready to go back to school this fall. A lot of work during the summer. You know, a lot of the faculty are off during the summer, but administrators and the classified employees are still there working our tails off. Was doing it from the patio. We are going back to campus. We did go back to campus. And wouldn't you know, my first day back to campus, I was diagnosed with COVID. I will tell you that I was surprised when my test results came back positive because I was just sneezing and coughing a lot and had a headache and just thought it was allergies. And so I put that out there for everybody because I was fully vaccinated. I'm very lucky that I was fully vaccinated because even though I did have to isolate myself because I was infectious, the symptoms remained mild through the whole process. And I thank the vaccines for that. And Pfizer, you know, now Pfizer coming out with their booster shot, I'll be the first in line to get it because I realize how easy it is to get this disease. Fully masked all the time, those kinds of things. So I'm not sure where and when I got it. It's a mystery to me. So be careful. Be really careful and get vaccinated. Wear your masks. Those kinds of things.
Okay, before London, I'm gonna jump in. I want to give like a shout out to masks because we were around Richard, my son and I. You know, we were around him, and he started wearing a mask as soon as he started getting symptoms, and we were masked if we were around him, and neither one of us got sick. So masks work. That's my shout out to masks. Okay, London, please share.
Shout out to mask.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm London. I work for UCLA for their police department. I've been there for about 15 years, but I've been with the university for 20. I used to work in physical therapy. Got to work with people in inpatient physical therapy in the hospital. I think, let's see, before COVID, like during COVID or the last few months that we've been going, I left patrol. I was a patrol officer. I was a trainer. I used to train new officers that came in. But then I ended up getting out of patrol, and now I work in crime prevention. So I get to, talk to a lot of people about, crime prevention stuff. I get to help people with kind of like fortifying their office space or buildings or apartment complexes, things like that. So I kind of get to be the face that's out there of the department and doing like community outreach type stuff. So it's kind of that. I think that's pretty much more in my wheelhouse of what I really like to do in regards to being in law enforcement. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I've been doing. I've been working throughout the whole COVID thing, masked up, vaccinated, and just still going. Had a lot of people close to me get sick. We had a couple of scares, but we've been actually okay. So no, I'm a big believer. Get vaccinated. Wear your mask, because whether you believe in it or not, and I deal with folks that will tell you on one hand they believe in it, other folks will be like, nah, it's a fraud, it's not real. But I look at it like this: if you really care about people, you truly care about people, whether you wear a mask or get vaccinated, do something to show that you actually care about the people that you're coming in contact with. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I'm pushing is act like you care. Don't just talk about it, be about it. So
love that. And that's awesome that you got to sort of shift into that more community building or community-based kind of thing. And it's cool to kind of know that there are those kinds of jobs, that they're like law enforcement jobs that are getting like in, talking to students and like you're saying, you're the face, that it's not just like, walking around in a uniform and being there for emergency purposes or whatever. Because when you say crime prevention, I immediately think, okay, this is the London McBride podcast. Talking about your work. Community building. Okay, that's all I wanted to say.
Community building. Yeah.
Please, getting out there in the community.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it's about.
Speaking of that, I want to share a little bit that I think I shared this at the end of June, that I was working on establishing a nonprofit to do this kind of community work that's been approved. So I'm trying to raise funds to do programs for the community. Like I'm working on a health and wellness project. I'm also working on like a career day project. So it's like a variety of different things and getting out and talking to people, seeing what they need and helping in that way. So that's what I've been doing in the last few months. And then also collaborating with a few people on projects like this that aren't necessarily for EPIC, but that maybe we can build for similar formats to get other kinds of conversations going. Either way, we're trying to dismantle the systems. Okay. So let's go to our theme for this conversation. And I just love this phrase so much. That's why I wanted to use it as the theme. This idea that further deterioration is on our hands. This idea that something bad has happened or there's been harm or damage, and you know it, you see it, you observe it, and then you do nothing, then anything that comes after it is on your hands. And this is true. It could be in a relationship. Her example of the house, an old house, in a neighborhood, if you're driving through it, and like you're saying, if you're going to say that you care about people, then what are you willing to do? Is it money? Is it time, resources? Are you actually do this? So I kind of wanted to build this conversation around this sentence because I really gravitated towards this sentence in that, I think it's the first chapter. Either of you want to comment on just that before I move on to August Landmasser? You just agree with me? Okay.
Yeah, we agree.
You're like, cool, it's fine.
Say This time, I had read the book we did last time. So you want to talk about race? I had read that a couple of times. This is the first time that I'm reading the book, and from the first chapter, I did feel that, oh no, what am I going to dig up, and that kind of stuff. And the author is amazing, Isabel
Wilkerson.
Wilkerson,
Mhm.
and I'm just like captured. And so I'm trying not to go through it because I want to be surprised as we have these discussions. But it's really hard to put the book down, and so I highly recommend that if you're listening, pick up the book and start reading it with us.
Yeah, it's fantastic. London, I don't know if you read it before.
No, I haven't read it. I hadn't read it before, but reading it now, I just think like with the first the statement that you put up, I think that's huge about, like, now that we're faced, we're staring at our issue. What do we do? Where do we go from here? And I think even in my profession, it's something that is the question is asked, like, where do we go now? Like, what do we do? We know that there's a problem. Some people think that there is a problem. Some people will try to deny the fact that there's systemic racism, and racism is still out there and things like that. But I think the biggest question that should be asked of people is, okay, you might not believe it, but would you believe that this is the stuff happening to me? If I told you, and we're supposed to be these friends, we're supposed to be close, we're supposed to be partners, would you believe if I told you that this stuff is happening to me, to my family, to my friends? And what would you do to change it? What are you going to do to get up on this front line with me to fight against it? And you get a variety of answers, and like I said, some still fight against it and say, well, it's not real, you've overcome, and stuff like that. And it's like, no, you just don't get it. So
Yeah, I think maybe what's so great about this coming right at the beginning, this idea of the further deterioration, is that then, because I feel like maybe a lot of times conversations start and end here, and it's like, what do I mean by that? Sort of like, if there's an acknowledgement that there is this system, it's racist or sexist or whatever, but we're talking about race. And maybe somebody does say, I'm so sorry that's happening to you. I'll support you, whatever. This book then kind of makes you go from there and look at all of the different ways that this system exists and the reasons why it exists, so that it makes it really hard then to look away. Because, and I think we see this a lot, maybe like on like when people bring when news people bring authors or political strategists or whoever to come on and talk about these kinds of things. They'll say, how can we have the conversation if people are not willing to even acknowledge that this exists, that this system exists, and that it was built this way from jump? Like, we can't even that conversation. And so it always feels like everyone's yelling and is so passionate about it, but it's because we can't get people to even acknowledge that is even how this work. Like, it exists. I'm telling you, it exists. Here's all the evidence. And so this book, this will be my second time, and I'm going to read it chapter by chapter as we go, to have like visceral reactions to it again as I remember these things. But that's sort of why I liked this idea being at the beginning. And then it's like, okay, now I'm going to show you why this is true. And if we continue down this road, we're going to keep oppressing people and destroying lives. So the stories that she uses are fantastic. Okay, so to kind of get into this idea, in that first part of the book, it's not part of the chapter, it's just like the very first thing she wrote about. She talks about this man, August Landmesser. And it's this famous photo, and I'll pull it up. Let me see. I can do two things at once, I swear. It's this famous photo where there's the salute. People, can you guys see that? Okay. So where the circle is, that's where August Landmesser is. And so you can see the whole idea, and she's describing him, is that not only is he not saluting, and Richard, you brought this up earlier before we went live, his arms are crossed. Like he's not, you're not going to make him do the salute, and he's staring on his fellow countrymen. What is going on here? And I think I've probably seen this before, but when I went to look at it, I thought, God, have I ever really paid attention to this photo? Or have I just glanced at it and was like, oh, that guy's not saluting, wow. And I feel like that is part of the problem now, that we're looking at people dissenting, like on the Supreme Court, or we're looking at people fighting injustices, and we're like, oh wow, that guy or that woman or whatever, they're really working hard and putting themselves out there, and then we just walk away. What do you guys think about this photo? What's the sentiment?
I think it's a bold move. I think, knowing his history, and that, he joined the Nazi Party, but he just didn't subscribe to all the stuff, and I think a lot of the times, we or people that start believing the narrative, they don't take the time to even research, or they don't take the time to even get to know people. I think it said about him is that he was his fiance that was Jewish. So, he knew these lies that were being said and refused to believe them because of the proof, and because of the relationship that he had, with this fiance. And I think, that's, I forgot who said it, but I know a friend who's a sports psychologist had posted something recently about being curious, and being curious about things stops judgment. So if I go out and I try to learn about another person's culture, who they are, knowing them as a human, then I'm not judgmental. I don't believe the things that are said about a specific group of people or a specific person, because I've taken the time to have this relationship with this person. So I'm no longer judgmental, and whatever people say about, said group of people or said person, I don't fall for it, because I've taken the time to develop this relationship. And I think that, you got to be bold, like him, to stand in the middle of all of this and say, well, I don't subscribe to that. And even then, knowing what could be the outcome of his life, because he refused to stand up and salute the Fuhrer.
Yeah. Go ahead, Richard.
Oh, I when I first looked up the picture, I started going person by person, trying to see, what did their face look like, and there's some people in the crowd that you can tell are just all behind that salute. They're like really excited to be able to salute. They believe in the Fuhrer. They're, that. But then you look closely, and there's some that are sort of glancing around, not really paying attention, but are doing it because that whole crowd is doing it. So they're just sort of that crowd movement. But specifically for August Landmesser, that the courage it took in that group, because he's not by himself in that thought process. you know, and he just said, I'm not saluting. And so the thought that I had is I start to cringe, especially in our country, because as things are being said, and we talked a little bit about it in the book, is what's being perpetrated. Like, you know, there is no more racism. Racism's over. Get over it. And those lies, when we know, if we start digging just a little deeper, that we know there's racism, there's things that we need to deal with. And so this sort of shows me that here's one man, and I'm absolutely interested. I know, Letty, you said you did some investigation about what happened with this family, to hear what happened here. Because you start to wonder, can things like that happen in our country? And I believe that
it did happen. I mean, not for nothing, but the rule that the law that was sort of in place to try to keep him and his fiance apart, I mean, that did exist in the United States. And, you know, until fairly recently, and probably in some states and some laws, I'm sure they were saying that some of the laws are still kind of in place around the United States about who can marry each other. And yeah, I think that they stayed together, they got married, had kids, and they got separated. They got found out, they got separated. And the last thing that I read about was they had 2 daughters, and I think that even the daughters, like they knew who they were, but I think they got separated also, the girls did. So it's not like it had anything to do with this photo. It was just that because of who he was and who he was married to, that is what happened to him and his family. So it's really sad that this is a situation where we do know what happened to this person who's in this famous historical photograph, because there are records of, you know, who was a part of the party, and obviously who they married and how they got caught, and then that they had kids. And I think Edith was the wife's name, and they were both sent to camps, both August and his wife, and then the kids were separated from the mom. So I think that picture shows, Richard, I think you were kind of talking about this idea that, or maybe I just thought of it while you were talking, that if you're in a crowd and you sort of get that mob mentality, that it's really hard to stand up to it, that the peer pressure and the societal pressure to do what everyone else is doing is really, really powerful, especially if the backlash can lead to, you know, horrible consequences for you as a person or for your family. I mean, this is a really tragic and like the worst example that you can come up with probably historically when we talk about the Holocaust, but it does happen here. I mean, people get beat up for, you know, during the civil rights movement, people were getting beat up because they were standing by saying, hey, don't do that. And it's like, oh, you're a part of this too now. And it's happening now. So people are vilified, hunted down. I mean, school board members and healthcare workers being threatened with being hunted down because they're speaking out. I mean, it doesn't even matter what the topic is. The idea that we do this to each other is just, I mean, it goes beyond racism. It's like that human condition. I don't know how to, okay, now I'm speechless. Okay, we'll move on. It's hard. It's hard to fight against. We talk to our kids about peer pressure, and then as adults, it's worse. It's worse. There's violence. There are other consequences. It's just crazy. Okay, so we're past that. In order to kind of go through, and Bill Moseley always said, let's define things first. So we're going to define, we're going to pull up Isabel Wilkerson's the author of Caste. She defined this later in the chapters, but I thought this was good to bring up now so we can kind of talk about this. So a caste system uses rigid, often arbitrary boundaries to keep the ranked groupings apart, distinct from one another, and in their assigned places. Okay, so that's kind of, this is not from the dictionary. This is what she wrote in the book. This is what caste means. And when we're talking about groupings, in this case, we're talking about people. That the people are distinct from one another, and that everyone has a place, and that we're all categorized by arbitrary boundaries. This is the premise. And this is what we can't ignore. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Any thoughts on this definition?
I think the author sort of hit it on the head when she was talking, and I can't remember the people that were saying these things from the book, so I apologize. But the guy from Florida, the rich guy from Florida, said, the reason he was supporting Trump was get things back to the natural order of things, and just immediately realizing that his position, as a rich white man, was threatened with the way the changes are being implemented in our country. And so he voted for Trump to get back to, his privilege and to make sure that he maintained it and it wasn't threatened.
This idea?
Yeah.
Everyone knew their place.
Yes.
Who told you? How did the information get out? That you're supposed to know your place. I think, are you talking about, Richard, was it a police officer that beat somebody up?
Yeah, that was the chief from Florida.
Yeah, was it Florida?
I mean, it was New Jersey.
I was like, I don't think it was Florida.
Yeah, it was New Jersey. Yeah, chief from New Jersey.
Yeah, he did say something similar. I don't know.
Yeah, he said Trump is the last hope for white people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that if we vote,
he literally said white people. He was like, not hiding it
at all.
This is why I'm beating these people up.
Trump is the last hope for white people, and if Hillary gets in, she gonna give y'all the right to vote. All right, she gonna allow y'all to have freedoms. That's basically it. But it goes with exactly what that says. Trying to keep people and positions to people based on their race, and then it's based on it. It even goes further than that, and what they tried to use, like from religion to other types of doctrine, to try to say, hey, well, the Bible did say you black people are this or that, and it's, but they believed it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, that's the problem. It's like, when do you just realize, like, okay, this is dumb. But it goes back to human nature of always wanting to be in with the crowd and not be ostracized and not look like the one standing on the outskirts saying, well, I disagree. It's the peer pressure. You're right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so because the system is the way that it is and the way it benefits who it benefits, people like our last president can say things like this. This is a quote from him, that he remembered a time when everyone knew their place. And so then that means that now someone in that position of power is allowed to say those things out loud, and that people who follow him are like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I just haven't said it out loud in a while in front of other people. So this quote kind of describes this idea, like what I'm saying about how it's, it comes back as people want to talk about it out in public, because now there's somebody in power who's giving them permission to do that. And this has been talked about to death because it's been it's been so long, so many years. But this idea, when she's talking about pathogens in the earth, and the example she gave of the anthrax coming up and like starting to kill the animals and making everybody sick. That's why I pulled that quote up for this specific idea that she wrote about, because it's always there. And if we can't go back and say, 1619, if we can't go back and say that, or 1500s, if we can't go back and say that existed, this is why it existed, this is who it profited, those are the toxins, right? If we can't talk about those, they just keep cycling back. And there are acts that go through Congress and we vote on things and things get better maybe for a year, programs, money, all the stuff. Someone like our last president comes along and like, digs up all of the toxins again, and then everyone, that sickness, that cancer kind of spreads throughout the country again. So I feel like this idea was such a great connection to this idea. Like, remember when? And then it got buried, and now it's back. What I want to ask you guys, have you felt like you're seeing it? Like, in your workspaces? I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but it doesn't have to be a coworker. You're both in education, this might be difficult. Where this idea of like the toxins, like, have you seen it kind of cycle through in the last, you've both been doing this kind of work for a while in education, in that kind of environment, whether it's at the administrative level or law enforcement, where you've kind of seen what happened 20 years ago, what did that look like? And then have things kind of cycled, or have they really escalated, or do you feel like it's always there? London, I know you're going to have a different answer than Richard. I have a different answer. Who wants to go first?
Richard.
Doesn't want to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. I think the answer is definitely yes. As I watch, I mean, it's not just my work or other people's jobs. I mean, you're definitely seeing it there. I think that the threat of becoming the minority group for whites is such a huge threat that you're watching the laws change state by state just to sort of corner the vote, so that white people can still be elected. And that's what all these changes are about. But I'm also seeing it on a micro level where people are saying things, in one board that I was attending, to where somebody said, I'm all for the diversity, equity, and inclusion, but it sounds like they want to be higher than me. And that was the comment by a board member. And it just was like, and the board just moved right on and didn't, and so I took notes, really quick, and just said this was the comment, just so I remembered it, that it's there. And I go back, just to, where that thought process comes from. Where did that come from? And you go back in time, and I'm just in my own self. I know that the feelings I get when I see people of color achieving things, I cheer, but there's a weird feeling of, that they overachieved. Like, that's my mindset, and I don't know where that comes from, and I don't like to say that out loud, but I'm like, and I think that feeling all the time. You see somebody get a PhD, and then I'm like, why am I thinking this? Where did this feeling come from? And I like to think that I grew up with, my single mom of 11 kids. We were poor, but my mom always seemed really progressive in her thought processes and the way she introduced us to the world. And so I'm very lucky in that sense. But where did that feeling come from? But I did go to a Catholic school that was an all-white school. And so with a lot of nuns as teachers, and so just things naturally came up. I remember, like, even my grandma, who I always thought was a good person, but I remember things like her, like a black man was opening the door for her, and I'm walking with my grandma, and instead of saying thank you, she nodded her head and did that tis tis tis, kind of thing. And then as I'm reading this book, I'm trying to think of these thoughts. Where did these feelings come from? Because they're ludicrous, they're idiotic, and people achieve. they need to be congratulated, on their merit, and not that there's a feeling that this was an accident or something along those lines. I hate it, and so, but as I see it pop up, because of some of the stuff, even reading the last book read and listening to boards, and I listen to more boards now than I ever have in my life, just to see where our local school boards are at, and hear these things, and I'm like, and nobody reacts. I feel like I'm the only person that reacts sometimes.
Well, that's sort of. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off. Okay. That's sort of the idea. Why I'm asking, because if you've seen, maybe not 20 years for you, more like 10, how long has it been? 15 years since you've been in this position at like a community college. Where was it so overt, I guess, maybe, or do you think it's more that maybe you just didn't notice before? Yeah. And just maybe over the last year or so, unfortunately, it's taken, all of these tragic things that have happened to get people's attention to that, to get white people's attention. Yeah. Don't be offended, people. You're white. Get over it. London, do you want to jump in? Support my comments?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think, yeah, it's still there. I've seen it. I've seen it in the profession, and I've seen excuses for the behavior within the profession, and why we do what we do, and making excuses even for bad behavior, and how we treat certain people. I think it is what are we exposed to, and then what do we start believing, and and because we're in a certain culture, like, what are we willing to put up with, and are we willing to risk everything to stand up, once again, to stand up, for truth. Why is this a fact? Why do I've heard people say, well, Blacks have the highest crime rate. And I'm like, where are you getting these stats from? And it was like, oh, no, that's real. And it's like, no, that's not, but then it starts to shape the culture, and it starts to shape the minds of officers, and these young officers that are coming out, because then you start seeing how they treat Blacks and other, people of color. You start to see that because the media is portraying them as one way, and they're being told that these are the people that are doing the most crimes and causing the most issues. I mean, myself included, fell for the stupidity because of the profession that I'm in. And I realized when I came back out to patrol that I was a part of the problem, because I believed the lies, totally believed the lies. And I was like, okay, yeah. And it was crazy because I remember coming back out to patrol, and I never glanced at a white person. Never. I mean, they could have rolled past me with 8 heads in the duffel bag and never would have stopped them at all, because society has made them seem unstoppable, and that they are, there's nothing wrong, but see Black, Latino pass by, and I'm like, yes. And I was so upset with myself that I had fallen, for that, I didn't do anything that day. I actually had to call one of my friends. Was like, this can't be. But, it's sad because no one knows the history. And I think, like, when you start looking at the history, and you, like you were saying, Letty, about digging up these toxins, if you just try to bury them and then you try to build on that, the toxins eventually come up and choke whatever it is that you're trying, whatever it is that you're trying to build. And you can't escape it. Burying it does not allow you the ability to escape. You have to deal with those things head on in order to get rid of them. and then you can lay that actual, better soil. So yeah, I mean, it's there, and the only thing that we can do to stop it is by, truly educating people on the truth and confronting those demons, and moving past them by wanting to move past them. But yeah, we're dealing with it. We're dealing with folks that just want to hang on to the bull crap that they was fed, for so long.
Yeah, I think that's why we hear a lot about just burning it all down, right? I mean, it's like even that idea of burning things they were talking about. She was talking about in this specific case with the toxins in that area was it wasn't enough to bury, even burying them, but then they also had to incinerate them at like a certain degree to kill what was there, right? It was like in order to, like, there had to be extreme measures, I guess is what the point is. And then like you're saying about people talk about rebuilding or whatever, but her analogy of the old house, I think is perfect because I feel like we all know someone who kind of half-asses the work around their house. Like, the fence that they're putting up, or light fixtures don't match. There might be mold, but they just keep painting over it, like stuff like that. None of that fixes the problem. It becomes more dangerous for the people around, right? It's like that analogy I think works really well. And I've known that I've heard her bring it up. People interview her, they talk about it a lot. They're like, it makes so much sense. What do you do when you buy an old house? If you really care about living in the house and you care about the people you're bringing into that house, you tear it down to the studs and you start over. I mean, that's not an exaggeration. That's what people do when they buy an old house and it just can't be fixed. They tear it down and they start over. Because of this, like you're talking about having to deal with people that you work with, maybe. Ignorance is no protection from the consequences of inaction. We are heirs to whatever is right and wrong. We can't just say we didn't notice, and then after we notice, we can't not do anything about it. You can't just be ignorant. You can't keep saying you didn't know, you didn't notice, you weren't aware. You have to you have to acknowledge it in your workspace, out in society, because if America is an old house and you just keep saying, let's just plaster over things, it's going to come crashing down. What do you think? Old house.
Yeah, I was as you were talking, I was thinking about critical race theory and the
Great,
argument.
we're going to get shut down. People are going to start calling. I'm just kidding.
Yes. Well, you see the arguments at the school boards of like, we won't have critical race, and people that understand critical race theory are sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? And to have a discussion about critical race theory is extremely enlightening. And so you can tell there's the closed-mindedness that happens, especially with parents, white parents. And that the threat is just that you use the word race in that critical race theory discussion. So you must be teaching it in these schools, and you're trying to brainwash my child. And I just think, just that's why I like this book so much, is because the analogy she's using, like this old house and the story of Russia, which I will tell you, I had never heard that story before. And I was just like, that really happened? Like, oh my God.
They tried to keep Chernobyl from the world, of course.
Well, I know, right. But it does say, that people are going to hide the truth, and so I never knew that story, and that's an amazing story. And the analogy to talk about it in this book is just incredible. And so, but people keep trying, like in critical race theory, they're just arguing at school boards when the school boards have nothing to do with the actual discussion and learning, unless you're in college. But to talk about critical race theory at the elementary school,
even then, unless you're actually going into like where you're studying that academically, Okay.
Yeah.
No,
But it is an attempt to hide the truth.
yes.
Yeah.
And not talk about the truth, and that truth of going back to what do we teach our children, very similar to what my grandma taught me, in that little simple interaction, and nodding her head like there was something wrong, that taught me something when I was young. I never didn't realize it, and I think for some reason my mom understood that. Like she said, I'm going to get the truth out, and in our family of 11, and so I did learn a lot from her. But these family histories of just polluting our kids' minds, this isn't really. A lot of it's happening in school, but a lot of it is happening at home in people that these kids respect, and it's got to change.
Here's something that we should be teaching. This basic idea that there have been 3 caste systems in like the history of our, what we understand to be modern history, right?
Yeah.
Nazi Germany, which was, we thought, toppled, exterminated the way that it lived in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. India's system that has been around for millennia, and then the United States. And the idea that this book caused people to question the validity of what she was saying, like it wasn't truth. Like, what caste? That only happens in books. That's like a story that you're telling about, Indian, the Indian system and how they treat, who the untouchables are, and maybe like that's all we know about the language used around caste systems. And the idea that the United States is in this conversation about a caste system that was created specifically so that there are people at the bottom. When you think about this, when you read it the first time, when you saw that the title was Caste, did you have like initial reactions? Was it something where you just like, yes? Or were you like, oh, I never thought of it that way? Or do you have like a reaction maybe, or some thoughts that you had about what this book was? London.
No, I and when you came out with what book we were going to read, no, I knew about it, and yeah, it it made me think about just historically, about all of the the systemic racism and just the hierarchy of who's who and who's going to be at the top, and when race was actually defined in America, considering whites the dominant and everybody else under them subordinates, and it's crazy because Hitler got his whole idea from the United States, and with the exception, he said that the reason why he did what he did to the Jews is because he really had a hatred for the Jews, so he took it a step further. But yeah, all his ideology with his system, his form of the caste system was brought about by what he saw going on with Jim Crow. So it's
and people won't believe it. They won't believe it. If you try to share that information with somebody, they're going to be like, "What? Never."
No, they don't want to believe it. It's the same thing with just what we learn, what we're being taught in school, and what we're being taught in the homes. And I remember how my dad was telling me, which shows you what what people want you to believe. They'll basically force feed you to believe it. When my dad's school in Waco, Texas was shut down, and it was due to integration. They shut the school down got rid of all the black teachers and sent them to white schools. So think about the history that was lost there and the generations that was coming behind, my father and my aunts and uncles and stuff in those schools, what was not being taught because they got rid of the black teachers. And now this history that we have doesn't even truly talk about slavery and how bad slavery was. And it doesn't even scratch the surface because those are the parts that they wanted to die. And even in, like I say, even in my own profession, when it comes to policing, we don't talk about slave patrol. We don't talk about how the police function in the North and in the South. We just talk about, hey, here's the ugly little blurb of what policing did. Hey, civil rights, with the dog and the water hose. And you see that picture. That's the picture that you see in regards to policing in America, the negative part of policing. But we don't want to uncover that this profession went after slaves and killed them and brought some back into slavery. And it's just, it's tore up.
It's the wanting to have the tradition or say that there's a tradition and it goes back however many years.
Yeah.
But then you only start talking about the things that happened within the last 50 years, the last 40 years. Yeah. But it's been around for a long time and we're going to honor that tradition, but we're only going to talk about what happened the last 5 years because it's been amazing. Richard, before you started reading the book, I know you and I had talked about it before you started reading it, but what were your thoughts initially? Like, especially, I think you don't really think about the idea that this Nazi Germany, India, and the US would fall into that same kind of category. Did you have initial reactions to that?
Caste? Well, it didn't surprise me in the sense of, we often hear about wealth and the distribution of wealth. Forget race in that discussion. Just talk about the distribution of wealth and the 1% that has the majority of the wealth. And if you think about that,
but they're all white, so we can't.
Right. Yeah, we can throw. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But so knowing there's a caste system and knowing that the wealth is so unevenly distributed, and trying to learn how to build wealth on your own and how impossible that task is. I mean, you can make some money in your life and you can be well off, but that doesn't mean you're wealthy. And I, my father worked his whole life, and towards the end, because he ended up in a hospital, then they had to negotiate with the hospital he ended up in, long-term facility. And then his money that he had saved his whole life, which wasn't a lot, but had to negotiate how they were going to pay the hospital bills back. And then all that money shifted right into the hospital. So any wealth that he had built was gone. And then my mom's death, in the same thing. She was so proud of herself that she had paid off her house. That was her wealth. That's what she had. And then in the end, because she also ended up in a long-term facility, but was, I think, paid under Medicare or some public assistance program, then the government took her house and said, she used this much money, we're taking the house, we estimate it. And it was just sort of, it was sort of bizarre how quickly government takes over and takes things from people that really don't have wealth. But then you hear about the wealthy, and there's cheating going on, meaning just unscrupulous, to maintain the wealth, and that they don't pay any taxes, and their houses don't get repossessed, and none of that happens because of their wealth. So I knew these caste system, existed in the United States. To talk about it in the context of race, I'm not surprised. I'll just keep it at that.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting. It would be really helpful It would really do a lot to move people forward or move the conversation forward for a lot of people if when stuff like that happens, alongside the grief, I think if people can see beyond that or after it to say, you know what, why is the system like that? And then what are we going to do to help change it? Because I'll tell you, people of color are constantly thinking about that all the time. It's a constant thought. What can we do to help ourselves in this system that exists? And no offense, but it feels like when shit like that happens to people who are not of color, and then you think about it and you're like, why is it this way? Oh my God, all the money's gone. We totally feel screwed. And it's because this huge thing happened and totally upended your life and your belief system for that event in that moment. And we can't have you're telling that story, and I mean, this happened last year and you and I've had many conversations about it, but this idea that if someone's listening to someone new, maybe like London or someone else, and it's kind of like, yeah, that shit happens. It happens. We get screwed all the time. People's money gets taken for no goddamn reason. There's no explanation. It's just, oh, you paid into this system and now we get to keep all your stuff. What do you care? You're dead. And like your family is suffering, your kids don't have a home, like all the stuff. And that's like an extreme example, but this is the kind of stuff that happens all the time, every day, to people who rely on these systems to get through and be healthy and try to have some kind of success in their life. And then bam, something tragic happens and it's like over the top. For someone like you and your family, it's like, how could this happen? It's almost like, I don't mean to make a joke. I do mean to make a joke out of it. I think it was D.L. Hughley talked about being shocked and appalled. I want to say that it was him, but there's always like this phrase that white people are like, I'm shocked and appalled that this happened. And it's like, if you would just look around, if you would talk to other people, if they, you know that someone's experiencing something or you see something on the news, don't ignore it. It's like, London, when you were talking about, do you believe that this is happening to me? Do you believe this happened? And how outrageous it is. And if you have any way to help out, even if you're just voting for someone who is saying that they want to fix this system, or they're not part of the system, they're not generating their own wealth from the system, they're not playing the system, whatever. There are all these little ways that can feel like there's help. And I'm sorry if you feel like I'm attacking you, but that's sort of like my reaction was like, yes, this shit happens to people of color all the goddamn time. I'm sorry it happened to you guys, but it happens in so many different ways.
Par for the course.
All the time. All the time. So sorry, that's my rant. I get one rant per hour, okay?
Yeah, that's good.
This is why I built the format, so that I can get online and rant. In our system, I think we all know the signal of the ranking is by race, and she didn't go into it in the first 2 chapters, but she will definitely go into describing, what the different ranking, what the system looks like, what the pyramid would look like, obviously with white supremacy at the top. We're getting to the top of the hour, so I want to make sure that we talk about this quote that's at the very end of chapter 2. And I didn't write down the person who said it. I'm so sorry. But the quote is, "The cleverest way that a culture has ever devised to manage and maintain a caste system," and he was talking about the United States and the system that has been built here, with the acknowledgement that it's not like it was just created a generation ago, 2 generations. It was founded this way. And I thought it was really interesting the way that he worded it, because it's very intentional. When something is clever, there is intent. This is what we meant to do. And maybe we can talk about the Constitution. I don't know. We can bring all kinds of official things into this. conversation. But I don't know. What do you guys think of this quote? Because it's at the end of the chapter, so it stays in your mind a little bit. But the way that this is being described, the use of the word clever to me hurts a little more, I think. Makes it more serious. Anyone?
No, I think, that's spot on. The system was built, it is actually doing exactly what it was created to do. I've had too many of my so-called, too many of my white friends try to glance over it and just say that's not it. It's only the elite. Only the elite are benefiting. And I said that's not true. Larry Elder, oh my God, he was talking about Larry Elder. He was talking about.
He was near us this weekend.
Was he? Yeah, he makes some definite stupid statements. And the one I saw he made was regarding reparations and about how, and he said it first. He was like, white people that lost their slaves, they got paid for them. They got paid back. And his argument was, so black people talking about reparations, then, white people should be getting reparations too. I was like, do they got it? Black people didn't get anything. Even when they joined and fought in the military, they still didn't benefit from the GI Bill. So people of color have been getting screwed from day one. And nobody seems to want to admit this. And we hide it. We hide it so much in the system. The system was designed and it is doing exactly what it was meant to do. All men are created equal. They weren't talking about people of color. We know that. When you look at the laws, when you look at how things are set up, nothing benefited people of color. It was to continue, 13th Amendment, it was continue to enslave. That's it. They tweaked it a little. Hey, you commit a crime, then you could go back into slavery. And that's exactly what they did with the black codes and the pig laws and all that kind of stuff. But yet, folks want to make you think that you're going crazy for believing this stuff. And people say, well, what's your historic reference on all that stuff? I'm like, my daddy. My dad and my granddad, my grandma. And I saw the stuff that they dealt with. I heard the stories, myself.
It's not old.
It's not old.
This is the problem. I mean, you're talking about.
It's not old.
Were you talking about Richard? That was a few months ago. It was over the summer, wasn't it? That board member making a comment like that. I think it was this year. Making a comment. And I'm going to go back to this statement about we're heirs to whatever is right and wrong. In Germany, they're not this idea like, I'll talk shit about America, but this idea where like, we never forget or whatever. In Germany, they make sure you don't forget, right? There are markers everywhere marking where things took place. The wall, East and West Berlin, all of the camps, things are memorialized. They talk about it in schools. They don't hide it. And it's not like we're constantly saying, oh, you guys should be so ashamed of what happened, 2 generations ago. It's like they're going to carry whatever shame or not they're going to have, but they're acknowledging that it happened.
Yep.
And they're going to do whatever they can to not let it happen again.
Yep.
I mean, maybe right now they're not doing such a great job, but for a long time, or at least they're having the conversations and saying, this is happening. What are we going to do about it? Because we cannot go down this road again. And we can't even say that this is happening in the United States. So this idea, especially since the system is built on color of your skin, something we have no control over,
No control.
that makes it easy to categorize people and rank them into the caste system that exists, but nobody talks about, right? London, it's that line that we were talking about, right? Where
Yep.
there's a line, it's always there, and we just have to know where it is. I'm getting all worked up. It's getting late. Okay. Any other comments about this? I know it's gonna be hard for these conversations because there's so much. It goes pretty deep into the things that are going on in the US, the way that we deal with how we teach history, or how we deal with other countries, and then how we're dealing with each other. God, right now, threatening people because they're wearing a mask. What is that? It always comes back to that. Any last? Sorry, Richard, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I do want to just sort of go with what London just said about convincing his white friends it's not only the elite, and I think that's a stumbling block for many white people. The majority of white people, they too have struggles, and they too have, and so it's difficult to understand. Like, it's easy for me to understand there's a caste system when I talk about Trump and Bill Gates and folks that are of wealth and have money, and it's like, oh yeah, there's a caste system, and I'm not part of that higher caste kind of thing. And so it's difficult to conceptualize in my head that I didn't that there's the micro level caste systems within even the middle class, within the lower class, but the lies that are told to create those castes at all those different levels, I think we talked about this in our last book, but it comes up again, is that white people are even being lied to say, you're up here in your lower class, you're at the top at least, because black people are lower than you, and made to believe that that's the case. And then things like what I told earlier just about myself, in that believing that somebody that's a person of color that gets a PhD is an overachiever. Like, where does that concept come from?
Well, they are an overachiever, but that doesn't make them any different than the white person who's also an overachiever.
Well, exactly. But yeah.
We'll talk. We're going to talk a little bit, and I don't remember specifically if she talks about colorism. I think she does, because with, like you're saying, that within each caste level, there's other things that also like push people down, but it's all based on skin color. It has nothing to do with anything else. Colorism is one of those things. Okay, so we're gonna wrap this up because I don't want to go over an hour. And I'm gonna pull up next week. We're going to have Sarah Louise Wilson's going to be on the 13th. She's going to help us discuss Chapter 3, An American Untouchable. She and I had a lot of conversations about this last year when we were reading this book together, and I just know that she's going to be so ready to have the conversation, so that'll be fun. I do want to, because she's an artist and I love her work, I'm going to talk about this next week, but I'll throw this up now. So if you're interested in looking at what she's got available, she opened up a new shop because she had a virtual show. It was really cool. You could go in and like look at things in a gallery, but it was virtual. And she sold a lot of the stuff that was in there, but then she also decided to put some of the stuff in a virtual store. So now it's all there. You can look at some of that stuff. I should have brought the drawing that I bought from her. I don't have it. My bad. Anyway, we'll talk more about that. So support artists, people. They're trying to make a buck, just like the rest of us. Okay, thank you so much for joining us. London, thank you. Richard, thank you for joining me on this very first. It feels like we've been doing this forever. And London will be back, Richard will be back, and we'll keep having these conversations, and we're going to go through and do chapter by chapter. Thank you, those of you that were online. Thank you for joining us, and everyone else who's watching this later. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.